was a late night in 1999. My friends and I walk up to a nondescript building on a quiet street in downtown Boston. From the outside, you could barely tell that this was actually one of Boston's best underground after-hours clubs. The DJ that night was Danny Tenaglia, who is legendary for his epic DJ sets that go as long as 13 hours. And those who are privileged enough to be there from beginning to end describe it as a soul-expanding experience. And that night, Danny took us to the heights of Everest and down to the depths of the Marianas Trench. Sometimes he dialed up the tension so much in the room it almost made you feel angry. But then he would release all of us at once with a song that was so beautifully played that you just wanted to give everyone around you a big hug. Yes, it was truly a soul-expanding experience. It was experiences like these, formed in Boston, where I went to school, and in New York, where I grew up, that inspired me to want to become a DJ. I wanted to reproduce and to share some of these transformative moments for me on the dance floor. And now, hundreds and hundreds of events, and more than 20 years later, I can still happily say that I love being a DJ. I never did manage a 13-hour set, though. My maximum was about 8.5 hours before this happened. But as many DJs would say, it's not about how long you can play, but about how far you can take it. About how far you can take people on this musical journey that you and the crowd co-create together. And that, to me, is the art of DJing. To me, there was a lot of parallels that I saw between DJing, between dance music, and also the psychological concepts that I was studying. So let me just share with you 3 of them today. The first is the concept of entrainment. Now, most people think that a DJ, what we do is just play hit after hit, pounding beats the whole night. But it actually takes a little more finesse than that, especially when you're just starting out. Now, as a warm-up DJ, very often you have to face an empty dance floor. And an empty dance floor is very anxiety-inducing. What you want to do is you want to play some hits to kick people's butts onto the dance floor. But you will find that if you do that, the opposite will happen. You will drive people further away. So what should you do instead? You should feel the room. Take the pulse of the room. Feel where people are at emotionally and play music that syncs up with their mood and make them feel safe. And then challenge them, lead them eventually onto the dance floor. How do you know if you're doing a good job? If you can see people nodding their heads. So if you can get them nodding and keep them nodding, pretty soon you can get them dancing. Now, this kind of synchronization of rhythm and movement, this is called entrainment. And entrainment happens everywhere. It happens between mechanical systems and biological systems, and it happens between people. There's actually a concept called conversational entrainment, where 2 people talking with one another will actually match the speed and rhythm of each other's speech, and even some of the body movements will be mirrored. And this is actually essential for creating a sense of rapport. DJing is also like a conversation. It's like a 2-way conversation. The crowd dances to sync up with the music, but the DJ also plays music that syncs up with the crowd. Now, a DJ who knows this, who knows how to entrain with the crowd, knows how to work a crowd. Now, the next concept is that of ebb and flow. I don't know if this has ever happened to you. You're with a group of good friends, right? Everyone's joking, laughing, having a good time, and then all of a sudden, everybody becomes quiet. It's kind of weird, right? And maybe kind of awkward, but it's also very natural. Now, there are ebbs and flows in the energy of any crowd of people, and there are ebbs and flows in the energy on a dance floor. And the same actually is reflected in the music. So let me show you, this is the waveform of a piece of electronic dance music. And this is zoomed out so you can see the entire song from left to right. You see right here with all the dark bands, the thicker the band, the more energy there is in the music, right? The more stuff there's going on in the song. But over here, it becomes light. Why? Now this part is called a breakdown. What happens during the breakdown is that you take out some of the most energetic aspects of the music, such as the kick or the bass drum, and you leave just little bits in there, and then slowly you add them back in. And by adding them back in, you build a sense of anticipation, expectation, and eventually, as it keeps rolling and going in this crescendo, and finally, during the build, and then the whole song comes back in, wham, all at once, and everyone on the dance floor goes crazy. All right, so this is called the peak. Now, in some genres of EDM production, this is also known as the rise and the drop. Now, this relationship is very important because for a piece of dance music, it's very hard to sustain high energy the whole way. You can't keep adding stuff. Eventually, it becomes too much, overwhelming. So in order to take things up higher, you actually have to take things lower. Take stuff away. Take away the things that the crowd has already gotten used to or gotten tired of. And you take them away so that people will appreciate them again. That's the concept of a breakdown and build. Now, the third concept I would like to introduce to you is that of the motif. A motif is a small piece of music that is a musical idea that is repeated often within a piece of music that becomes an identity of that piece of music. So in classical music, we have very famous motifs, such as, everyone knows this motif, right? There are also very famous motifs in dance music, such as that step. Okay? That's Marshall Jefferson. That was Underworld. Now, in modern music, motif is also known as riff or hook. Different names, but they stand for the same thing. Pretty much, once you hear the riff or the hook or the motif, you will know what song you're listening to. So this is very important in identifying a piece of music. Now, a DJ who knows the value of a motif will not waste it in the mix. If it's a good motif that's being introduced and everyone will expect it or know it, we'll let the music actually stop sometimes, take down the energy, just so that a good motif can come in its full glory. These are all techniques that DJs can use to generate the surprise or drama on the dance floor. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a playthrough of a piece of dance music. Now, this is a song that I produced many years ago. The reason I chose this song is because it's relatively simple. The motif is very clear, and you can hear exactly how it works through all the parts of the music. This song is called Knockdown, and I used to play this a lot back at a club in Taipei called Luxy. I hear some chuckles in the audience. Some of you may have been there. All right, great times. All right, so maybe you even recognize this track. So this is Knockdown, and I'm going to talk through it and tell you about how all the pieces fit together. Here we go.
First we have some drums, and now this first part is the intro. Now in the DJ-friendly mix, this part usually consists of just the most basic drums and percussion. So usually if you heard this by itself, you will find it quite boring, but DJs need this longer beginning for the beat matching. And here we have some guitar chords, and this is the motif. Now all the personality of the track comes from this motif right here. Here we have the introduction of the bass, which runs in parallel with the motif. The The bass line and the kick work together to establish the groove, which is the backbone of any dance track. Alright, so pop quiz. What is this session called? Breakdown, that's right. So here we only have the motif. All of your attention is focused on this element. But listen carefully as it begins to change. And we have these delays added to the mix. And there's a sense of anticipation. And this is usually when the MC might say something like, "Put your hands up!" Alright, well, why don't we do that? Put your hands up. Put your hands up. Pretend we're in a club. That's right. Here's the bill. Here's the bill. Wait for it. And 4, 3, 2, 1. Knockdown.
The whole song for you, right? I don't want to get you guys too excited. This is TEDx stage after all. But maybe we'll play it at the after party. Would you guys like to hear it then? All right. All right, so now that I've introduced these three concepts to you, how does that fit into our life, your life? How does that work? Recently, I was counseling this teenage girl that was bullied by her classmates. And she was referred to me by her mother. And as you can expect with such cases, she wasn't exactly ready to open up to me in the beginning. So we were sitting there in the room, she was across the room from me, and between us there's this huge space of silence. But instead of getting frustrated, I went into DJ mode. And I thought of her as a dancer on the edge of the dance floor, of an empty dance floor. And I felt where she was emotionally. I changed my patterns of speech and my rhythm and my intonation to engage with her and also to entrain with her. And at the same time, I was sending out signals that would invite her to join with me in this dialogue space. The dialogue space where she would feel safe enough to share more of her story. It worked, and eventually we were able to have a fruitful conversation. And the next time you guys have a conversation that feels like you're not really getting through, you can try this. Focus on listening to the person's intonation, their rhythm. Feel their energy and entrain with them there. Match their energy level. Don't just think about what you're going to say. And you will find that oftentimes rapport is built not by what you say, but by how we both say it. So in terms of ebb and flow and breakdowns and builds, every day our energy levels are not consistent. And so we should build our days around the natural ebbs and flows of our life and not in spite of it. It sounds like a very simple idea, but actually so few people actually do that. You know, we all pack out our schedules. We schedule one thing after another, and it's just go, go, go from the moment we open our eyes until we're lying there on the bed, too exhausted to move, and yet too wired to sleep. Now, this can only go on for so long. So I always advise people in my own personal coaching, you have to engineer your own breakdowns. Engineer your own breakdowns so that you can go up higher, especially before you have a peak performance, before something important. This period of very deliberate and intentional quiet and reflection is very important. We need to break so that we can build. And how about motifs? Well, I like to think of motifs in our life as the patterns of thought, the little things that we tell ourselves repeatedly over time that actually form a core of our personality. So what is your personal motif? We all have one, but we may not be aware of it because sometimes you repeatedly tell yourself so many times it just becomes like background noise. But imagine someone who wakes up every day and tells themselves, you know, I'm going to get mine, or everyone is out to get you, or win at all costs. imagine how that person would react to other people, or how that person's mental state would be compared to someone who tells themselves life is worth celebrating, or I can be loved for who I am. So motifs can be reconstructed also. I often advise my clients to write down their personal motifs. Write them down so you can read them aloud. And if they're too negative, try to change it. Form it in a more constructive and positive way. And if you repeatedly tell yourself this as an affirmation, you will find that the theme of your life and the song of your life starts to change its tune. And indeed, life is like a song. In fact, if we have the chance to zoom out on a person's life narrative arc and visualize it like a waveform, it would look very much like a piece of dance music. We have our introductions early in life where we're just getting our footing, establishing ourselves. We have the motifs that come in, our experiences that start to form our personality. We start to catch our groove in our 20s, and we start to experiment. Maybe we enter the main productive period of our lives from our 20s, 30s, into our 40s. But then what happens with so many of us is, middle of our life, we find that we actually have to reprioritize. We need to break down again, to essentialize. And when you're in the breakdown, it's a little scary because your groove is gone, or you gave up your groove. But if you listen and are patient, then you can start to hear the motif coming back in. Little by little, softly at first, but then louder and louder, rising in a crescendo, until eventually, if you embrace it and know how to work with it, you will achieve another peak in life, the second wind of your life. Maybe you can even change up your tune, try something totally different later in your life. But then, as it so happens inevitably with all of us, we will all reach the end of our life song. That part is called the outro. And at the outro, things are essential again. Just the basics. Because it's no longer our song that matters so much as the song of the next generation that is fading in. And as it plays louder and louder, when the time is right, with a simple flick of the crossfader, we're out. That's why they say God is a DJ. There's a song called God is a DJ. And it says, "This is my church. This is where I heal my hurts. It's a natural grace of watching young life shape. It's in minor keys, solutions and remedies, enemies becoming friends when bitterness ends." Now, Faithless is referring to the club like a church. But I like to think of our whole world like a club. And we're all members of this club. And in this club, there are billions of dancers, each dancing their own song of life, each song unique. There's long ones and short ones, loud ones and soft ones. There's major keys and minor keys, all of them mixing and melding into each other, forming remixes and mashups. And if we embrace this concept, we can also become the DJ of our own lives. We can change up the rhythm, dictate our groove. We can create our own crescendos, design our own breakdowns and builds, maybe even change a key, march to the beat of a different drummer. There are elements of mystery and spirituality here that's much more art than science. But this we know for sure. There's a rhythm in here. And as long as this keeps beating, the rhythm doesn't end. So let the music play on and become your own life DJ. Thank you very much.